Colleen.
And we're the
Cousins Weird.
And we're back in our pod lab today, and Colleen is recovering from multiple surgeries.
Yes.
And she looks like she's ready for Halloween.
I am. I have a zombie arm and a slit throat. I'm ready to go. Bring on the spooky times. I don't even have to wear a costume. My son's been calling me Freakin' Mom. I'm like, yep, that's me.
Oh, yeah. I am not drinking an Arctic-themed drink today because I really wanted a Guinness Nitro Cold Brew coffee draft because they're freaking awesome, and I had some left, so I'm like, I'm having that today because it's that kind of day. Feels like fall when I'm a little sleepy, you know, the cool air lethargia.
Yes, it feels good though.
And I'm like, I need this Guinness coffee because it's Guinness and it's coffee. It's like two awesome things.
Two yummy things together.
If you haven't tried this, like, freaking go out and buy a 4-pack because it's awesome. It's
I'm not drinking because, you know, narcotics. Not a good combo. My husband makes fun of me because I follow even Tylenol. I won't take more than you're supposed to, and he's always like, Tylenol's not going to kill you. I'm like, it could. You don't know anything. You're not a doctor, so shut up. So I don't combine my drinks and my narcotics. So one thing, we're talking about coffee, Margaret. Did you know? You okay?
I'm choking. Sorry, I started to choke on my own saliva there. So
Margaret almost died, but we're back again. Speaking of coffee, Margaret, did you know that anyone that wanted to can buy us a coffee and support our podcast at oh shoot, why did I forget it all of a sudden? Buy me a coffee. Hold on, I'm pulling it up because I can't remember anything. Anyway, you do it, and it's $5 donation, and you help support our podcast. You can do it once and buy us a cup of coffee, a cup of beer, pint. It's buymeacoffee.com /The Cousins Weird, and then if you do a monthly, you do a $5 a month, that goes to us, and we're able to update our equipment and have more cool stuff for our pod lab and give you more stuff. Yeah, and have merch. Be able to get some merch out there, which if you do the monthly thing, you actually get to have exclusive stuff that we're only going to be available to you for $5 a month, which is pretty cool. You can see some flashback pictures of Margaret and I that are only going to be seen in there. We'll send you
embarrassing
pictures that you have to pay money to see them because we're not giving them away easily. And then you also will get personal message from us thanking you and some cool extras in there. So if you want to support our podcast, you can go and do a one-time, like I said, buy us a cup of coffee. So it's buymeacupofcoffee.com /The Cousins Weird. So that's that.
Buy me a coffee.
Buymeacoffee.com.
Yes.
I finally remembered it.
Okay, so we are going into part 2 of the Franklin expedition.
I'm
Colin
excited.
and I are snacking on chocolate just because, you know, in solidarity with these sailors who had 3,000 pounds of chocolate or something on this stupid boat.
We had to have some chocolate, and it's one of my favorites because it's peanut butter M&Ms, and I love them.
They're so good. So if you hear crunching, it's just us crunching.
Just me eating an M&M.
For sure. Okay, so we left off with one of the expeditions that had gone and came back with nothing. That was in 1852. In January 20th of 1854, so we're talking 2 years later, and this is actually 9 years after the London, this is 9 years after the expedition sailed. So we're talking, nobody's heard anything for 9 years.
That's a long time.
It is. The London Gazette published that the officers and crews of the Erebus and the Terror, they will be considered dead by the end of March of that year, which was 1954. And their wages would be paid to their relatives up until that date, which is kind of awesome that they did that. We're going to consider them, by the end of March, if we haven't heard anything, we're going to consider that they've all died, and then we'll pay all their relatives all their back pay. And they were getting, double pay because of the
conditions.
Yes, just because of how long it was going to take. And this is 9 years, and it was supposed to be 3 years.
Yeah.
In October of that year, London received word from a man we talked about earlier. He's John Ray. He worked for Hudson's Bay Company. And that was in northern Canada. And he was a British man. I thought he might have been American, but he wasn't. He was British.
Okay.
But he had made a major discovery while surveying the Boothia Peninsula. And there were still people who were doing searches on their own just because of the $10,000
right.
or 10,000 pound rewards.
Reward.
It was like a total of 20,000 pounds is what they were going to be rewarded. But he'd made this. He'd been interviewing the different Inuits in the area, who told him of a party of what they called kabloonans, which was their term for white men.
Okay.
Kabloonans.
Kabloonans.
I feel like a kabloonan.
I'm a big kabloonan.
And they were telling him about this party of men who had starved to death to the west. And they had many personal artifacts from the men on the expedition, such as they had like monogrammed silver forks and spoons that had Crozier's and Franklin's initials on them.
Oh.
They also had John Franklin's Hanoverian Order of Merit. So, like, it was like some kind of an award. I think.
Okay.
Or a medal, some kind of medal.
Some kind of
and it's like,
thing.
did they trade with the Inuit, or did the Inuit just
Take
scavenge them after
they're dead? Yeah.
They had a lot of these artifacts from
the
these
people.
from the people and from these two ships. So I was like, well, the fact that they have these does not bode well for these men.
No.
They're obviously no longer with us, These Inuits described men dragging sledges down the coast of King William Island, and the discovery of their bodies a year later that showed evidence of cannibalism.
Ew.
Right. And the British
They went from eating shit to eating each other.
Right. The British Admiralty discounted this. So, like, they don't know what they're talking about. They're savages. They're lying. They don't know. They never... If anybody ate them, it was these Inuits. This is like, the British were really offended.
Right.
Like, there's no way our men...
pasty white men wouldn't eat each other.
Themselves. There was no way that they would do that. It's just impossible to think. So they're like... That's inconclusive. We cannot.
We're not gonna take their word for
it.
Yeah,
like no, we can't. But they did reward John Ray. They gave him 8,000 pounds, and his men had to divide up 2,000 pounds.
That sucks.
Like, they did just as much work as he did.
I know,
but he was
shitty.
like the captain, so he could.
Right.
On a side note, there's a famous poet who was actually one of my favorites in high school, Alfred Lord Tennyson.
Okay.
He's John Franklin's nephew.
Oh, interesting.
Which is crazy. Okay, at this point in history, Britain was embroiled in the Crimean War. So all the public's and the government's attention was on that. They kind of lost interest in the Franklin expedition. They're like, oh, at this point they're all dead. What do we need to know?
Right.
Like there's no way we'll find them alive, so they just kind of forgot about it because there's like all this stuff happening with this war that they were in the middle of.
They have other things to worry about.
But Lady Franklin refused to give up. She didn't know what happened to her husband. She refused to give up any kind of hope that she had. This woman was like amazing.
That's awesome.
She was born Lady Jane Griffin.
Oh, I have a griffin.
When she and Sir John married, she was in her 30s. So at this point, like at that point in time, she was on the shelf. Is what I would say.
Yeah,
she's like an old spinster. She's 30. She was a woman who was independent. She was free thinking. She'd seen the world. She gets married to this naval officer, and that's probably why she was so accepting of him needing to go on these excursions, because she understood. And
she was an independent person. She didn't need her husband around all the time.
I mean, she was wholly devoted to him.
Aw.
She sought help from the British, the U.S. president, the Russian emperor.
Wow.
She became an expert in Arctic geography, and she inspired many of the British people with her tenacity and her refusal to give up. Like,
That's
she was
awesome.
like this beacon of hope. But like, she, even after 9 years, when everybody else was like, oh, there's nothing more to find.
Right.
We'll move on with our lives.
Right.
She's like, no.
I need to know what happened to my husband.
She refused, too. She's like, she tried to convince the British Prime Minister for one more search, and she failed. So she appealed to the public for donations, and she eventually was able to purchase a steam yacht named the Fox, captained by Francis Leopold McClintock.
Ooh.
And it's spelled M''Clintock. So it's McClintock.
I like that.
It's just fun. He had already been involved in 3 previous search expeditions for the Franklin expedition. So, like, he was kind of seasoned. She had him captain it. His lieutenant was Lieutenant, if you say it in the British. Lieutenant William Robert Hobson. And they sailed on July 1st of 1857.
Okay.
Yeah. They got across the Atlantic. They wintered the first winter in Baffin Bay. And then by August of 1858, they reached Beattie Island, which is where
the graves
left.
were.
Yep, and the graves were there. There, McClintock erected a monument to all of the crew and officers that had been on these 2 ships on behalf of Lady Franklin.
Aww.
She's like, you get there, I want you to erect. This monument's still there, by the way.
That's amazing.
If you go there, it's still there where they erected it.
So cool.
It's really sweet. They spent the next winter near the eastern entrance to Bellet Strait and sent small parties overland to King William Island. Hobson's group went to the west coast of the island, and McClintock, he went down the east coast towards the back river. They sometimes call it the Fishback River.
Okay.
And in late April, McClintock encountered 2 Inuit families, and they traded for Franklin relics that they had. They traded them and got these back. They also told them that they had seen 2 ships, and one had sank in deep water. The ice had forced the other one onto the shore, and they said that the people took the boats away, which they're thinking they're the lifeboats,
right,
to the large river the following winter, and their bones were still there. This is what the Inuit told them. So they're like, they took the boats overland to this river, and that's where their bones still are. He's like, later, he met up with a large group of Inuit in a snow village, and he traded for more relics. They had a silver plate with the initials of, I think, Francis Crozier on them. So, like, they're finding these artifacts that are obviously from this expedition.
Right.
You know.
They've been here. Yeah. These Inuits saw them. Right. They have their shit.
And a woman who was there said that many of the white men dropped by the way, on the way to the Great River. They would just drop. And then some of them were buried, and some were not. So, basically, she's saying, probably in the beginning of this trek, if people died, they buried them, and then later on when they're all
just like,
exhausted,
we're tired, we don't have time for this.
People just dropped and died and were left on
like,
them.
see you.
Yeah.
See you when my beer. Peace.
And in May of 1859, McClintock found a human skeleton. It was face down, and it had a steward's uniform from the Franklin expedition on it.
Oh.
It was found on a ridge near the Peffer River on the southern shore of King William Island. So, like, they found evidence of this. They found a skeleton laying on its face.
Wow.
Which is like...
They dropped.
He probably just fell down and died.
And everyone just kept going.
Terrible.
Yeah,
Can
it's
you
sad.
imagine how awful you're walking till you just lay...
You just lay down and die.
Like, you fall down dead. I can't imagine how awful that was. Like, oh, it's terrible. And actually before that happened, before he found that skeleton, on May 5th, Hobson's team, they were on the northwest coast, they found the only written record from the expedition. The only piece of evidence from this expedition. And I'm actually going to read it verbatim. Because, like, you can find this piece of paper on the internet, and it's really hard to read because it's written in quill pen and in
weathered
cursive,
probably,
and it's like written, and then it's written there. It was an original note, and then they went back a year later and wrote
over
along the edges an update. So it's kind of like, you know, it's like they like, oh, here's the update, and they wrote around the side. But it stated 28 of May 1847, HM ships Erebus and Terror wintered in the